at constraint optimization. Now, this is a very important subject, and I think as we start, we're going to start by looking at being able to identify constraints in a given scenario. Then from there, the objective, when it comes with the constraints that have been identified, is to determine the optimal production mix. So we're going to go through that. And also, I'm going to take you through the different tools that we use in the different circumstances and being able to know how to use them. The first one that we'll go through is the contribution per limiting factor. From there, we look at graphic linear programming. We're then also going to look at shadow prices, also is an alternative that is basically opportunity costs. Then we're going to look at the non-financial factors to consider in a decision-making process. Right, so the way I've structured the class, there's going to be 3 videos that you will need to go through as part of this module. The first part will deal with the introduction, as well as where there is one constraint. Then from there, I'm going to talk about where there are 2 constraints that achieve the same ranking. We're going to finish off with looking at 2 constraints with different rankings. So, what is a constraint? In most production environments, particularly in the short term, certain raw materials or inputs into the production process may not be available for us to meet our production capacity. For example, we may not have enough labor, maybe because there is an ongoing strike that's going on, so the labor hours become a constraint. Maybe Cito Ferrari is rationing water, so if water is part of our production process, for example, we are Delta, water can become a constraint. So different materials, it could be machine hours, it could be anything, can be a constraint. Just to emphasize, when we talk about constraints, normally constraints exist in the short term, not necessarily in the long term. So this is focused on decision making in the short term. In the long term, an organization can make plans to overcome the different constraints that it might face. So here we're talking about a constraint within the next month or within the next couple of months, but not necessarily over a long period of time. Right, so the exam questions that you're going to get is to be able to come up with an optimal mix given a limited resource. When you start like that, the objective is to get a mix that will maximize profit. Therefore, we are looking for an optimal mix where profit is maximized. So that's your overarching objective when we start this. You'll see that this topic is obviously going to be integrated with other relevant costing questions. I think this is one of the most favorite areas for examiners. If we go back to relevant costing, which I'm sure we've already covered, the relevant cost, say for a special order, you find it's your marginal cost plus your opportunity cost. So the moment you always have an opportunity cost, it means that there is a constraint, because now you're having to sacrifice current production or other production for the sake of meeting a special order. So that is the integration that you're likely to see. And as we look at different questions, you'll be able to apply that. So what are the tools that we use? Number one, if there is one constraint, we use a method that we call contribution per limiting factor. And that's the first one that we're going to go through. Where there are multiple constraints exist, and if all the constraints would give us the same production ranking, we can still use the contribution per limiting factor. Then when there are 2 products and multiple constraints that are existing, and here specifically only 2 products, we use linear programming because it's going to use a 2-dimensional X and Y axis, so it only works for 2 products, but there could be multiple constraints. Then last is when you've got multiple products and you've got multiple constraints. In this case, we use the simplex method. Let me add that with the simplex method, it's not part of our syllabus. You should just be able to know that there's a simplex method which we use when we've got multiple products as well as multiple constraints. Right. So let's go back and look at an example. In this example I'm going to look at we are producing product A. The selling price is $300 and the variable cost is $100, and then there is additional material of $50, which means their contribution is $150. Now, assume that the material, which is $50 per unit, is limited. Thus, to produce 1 unit of product B, we'll need to give up 1 unit of product A. In this case, what we are saying is we're going to sacrifice 1 unit of product A for us to produce 1 unit of product B because it requires this material, which is in short supply. So the way we look at relevant costing is, like I said before, it's your marginal cost. In this case, our marginal cost is material B, which is $50. And then the lost contribution, because we've sacrificed product A, we're going to lose a contribution of $150. So the relevant cost for producing B becomes $200. So that's how you look at it in that sort of case. Or another way of looking at it is you can calculate the relevant cost excluding material A from that calculation. So your opportunity cost excluding material A gives us a contribution of $200. So this is an example that I just give so that we can have a proper grounding and a proper foundation for this. Right. Remember, in an exam, for every input into the product, so this is how you start. Always look at how much resources do I need. Students always omit this part. Every time, for example, you get a special order question, always consider whether I have enough resources for me to meet the special order. Otherwise, if you don't test that, you're going to miss out on the opportunity cost. So in an exam, calculate how much of the resource do I need, how much of the resource do I have. That's the second thing, very important. Then you conclude, is there a limit or a constraint? Say you've got labor, you can calculate on labor, and labor you realize that you have enough, then you conclude it's not a constraint. Material X is not a constraint. You can say then material Y is a constraint because it's a limited resource. So when considering how much of the resources available, always there could be opening stock of that particular where there is material involved. And also consider how many products that we have, how many constraints do we have, because that will guide the kind of method that you're going to use in the process. Right, so let's start with the first one, production mix decisions, where capacity exists, and in this case we're going to look at where there is one constraint and we've got many products. Like I said, where there is one constraint and many products, we're going to use the contribution per limiting factor to determine the optimal production mix. Now the best way for me to explain this I'm going to use an example. There's an example that I have here. We're going to look at so the example that I'm going to use here, we're going to use contribution per limiting factor. So this company, it's manufacturing two types of dairies. You've got your normal dairy and you've got your leather bound dairy. The expected demand is 4,000 units of normal dairy and 10,000 units of the leather bound dairy. I've got the selling price here. I've got material cost, labor cost, variable overheads, selling expenses, giving us a contribution of $30 for normal dairies and $35 for the leather bound dairy. Labor is paid $20 by the hour and total hours available is 55,000. Now, like I said before, in this case, the first thing that you need to do is how many hours do we need? So that's the first thing that you need. How many hours do we need? So in this case, for labor is paid $20 by the hour and we have $80 for a unit. So it means an hour per unit we need is 80 divided by 20. So we need 4 hours for each unit. In this case, it's $100 divided by 20. Right, so for the normal dairy I need 4 hours per each unit, and for the leather bound I need 5 hours per each unit. So in total, so when you look at the total number of hours, it's then 4 multiplied by 4,000, which is 16,000 in this case, and then in this case it's going to be 50,000. If I add the 2 hours requirements, right, so we have got 66,000 hours that are required, and our question says we only have got 55,000 hours available, so which means we have got a shortfall in terms of hours, and our shortfall is the difference between 66,000 minus the 55,000. So we've got a shortfall and we've got a constraint of labor hours of 11,000 hours. Like I said, we're going to use the contribution per limiting factor in order to calculate and be able to provide a ranking. So there's our contribution per unit, and there's our limiting factor, which is the hours per unit. So that's what we're just going to calculate, which is contribution per hour. So that's what we're calculating in this case, contribution per labor hour. Right, so it becomes 30 contribution divided by 4, which you get 7.5. We do the same for the leather bound dairy and we get 7. Then we do our ranking. In this case, this is ranked 1 and this one is ranked 2. So we're gonna prioritize based on this ranking. We'll prioritize the normal dairy and then secondly followed by the leather bound dairy. Just to calculate our optimal production mix. So this one requires 16,000. So in terms of hours, we're going to give 16,000 to this one in its entirety. Then we're going to give the remainder of the hours to product leather bound dairy, which is in this case out of available hours of 55,000 minus what we've given to the normal dairy, we get 39,000. So in terms of units, it becomes 16,000 divided by 4, which is the hours that are needed per unit, and in this case it's 39,000 divided by 5. So our optimal production mix, you'll see that it's 4,000 of the normal dairy and 7,800 of the leather bound dairy. Remember, our expected demand in this case was 10,000. Now, this is how you use the contribution per limiting factor. Now you can go ahead and calculate the contribution that we'll get in total, which becomes our optimal production mix. Thank you very much for this part of the video.